holy presence, the Spirit moving in. We breathe in your presence, breathe out your praise. Whatever you want, we're ready for you. This is our invitation. Come have your way. Whatever you want, we're ready for you.
Thank you, Asit. Thank you, Asit, for choosing a great song. It was quite interesting. It's actually the first time I heard that song. Never heard it before. How's everyone doing? Hope you're all well. Anyway, today we're continuing the story about David and King Saul. Now, um, in today's lesson, King Saul he was in a battle with an army of Philistines, and while he was in a battle, he got injured accidentally. Just an arrow, one of the archers shot an arrow randomly, and it hit King Saul. Now you remember that King Saul, he spent many years trying to catch David because he really wanted to kill David. I'll read this part, okay? Pay attention. All is lost. The Philistines have routed us, and now my sons are dead, says King Saul. End my misery. Take your sword and run me through, lest the Philistines come and abuse me. He says, finish me. I'm dying anyway because of this arrow. Please, my servant or one of his men, kill me, he says. And his man says, I cannot, King Saul, you are God's anointed. I cannot do that. And he says, if you won't do it, then I will do it myself. God has taken his hand away from me. My solace is to join my sons now in death. And so he falls on his own sword and kills himself that way. Now the enemy come. This is kind of a gruesome part. You can close your eyes if it's too gruesome for you, okay? Especially the younger ones of you, like Atara. Strip off his armor and cut off the old fool's head, says one of the chief of the enemy army. Put his armor in our temple as an offering to our God and fasten his body on the wall of the city as a sign to everyone. Though the remaining Israelite army had fled at the defeat, some valiant men from the town of Jabesh Gilead traveled through the night. They took down the body of Saul and his sons to return them back home. So some people from this town called Jabesh Gilead, they came and took the bodies of King Saul and his sons down from the wall of the enemy city. After they burned the bodies, they buried the bones in Jabesh and fasted for 7 days. He was our king. We shall honor him and his sons with mourning, they said. And so they gave them proper burial. They didn't leave their bodies to rot on the wall of an enemy city. Oops. Let's see what happened next. Here is David. And what's happening here? Somebody comes to him. David says, where have you come from? The man says, I am an Amalekite and have escaped from the camp of the Israelites. The army of Israel fled before the Philistines. Both Saul and his son Jonathan are dead. So he brought the bad news, the news that the king and all of his sons are dead now. David asks him, how do you know? I happened to be on Mount Gilboa and saw the king mortally wounded. Mortally means he was dying. Saul was in the throes of death and begged me to kill him. So I did. So he's kind of telling a lie over there. He didn't kill anyone, but he says he did because he expects to be rewarded for that, because he knew that Saul was trying to kill David. So he thinks David would be happy if I tell him that I killed the king. Well, you'll find out that David was not happy with that. And look at that. What does David do? He says, who can read that part? No, he's like, ugh. What does it mean? He's in pain emotionally, right? Your glory, O Israel, he says, lies slain on your heights. Your glory means your king. He lies, he's dead. O daughters of Israel, weep for Saul. How the mighty have fallen in battle. He said, he cries for Saul and Jonathan and other sons of Saul. And what do you think happened to the man who said that he killed King Saul? He expected to be rewarded, but David says, kill him. You testified yourself that you killed the anointed of the Lord. What? He didn't expect that. Well, he lied in the first place, but that's not the point of the story. Let's see what the actual lesson is about by reading the first part. Tragedy strikes. Tragedy is when something sad happens. And somebody who didn't read yesterday, would you like to raise your hand? I'll ask you to read. Nishia, you already read yesterday, so let's ask somebody who didn't read yesterday. Esit or Budini?
Okay, sir, but I'll keep my hand raised.
Okay, you can keep your foot raised too. Esit or Budini, which one? Or both of you? I cannot hear you.
Me.
All right,
Esit.
Esit, please read the first part. Tragedy strikes.
Tragedy strikes. When David came back from his battle with the Amalekites, a young man arrived with bad news. The Philistines had attacked Saul's army on the mountain of Gilboa. The fighting was fierce, and in the chaos of battle, an arrow hit and wounded Saul. Saul killed himself by falling on his own sword. Jonathan and his brothers also died in the battle, together with those who had not fled. When David heard about the death of Saul and Jonathan, he tore his clothes and cried bitterly until evening.
That's right. So this is not the reaction that they expected from David. Everybody thought David would be happy that King Saul died because Saul wanted to kill David. He hunted for him for many, many years, trying to kill him. And now David is crying because Saul is dead. That's not what they would expect. Oh, let's read the second part of the lesson. How can I comfort a friend when someone has died? You know, sometimes people die, grandparents, grandmothers, grandfathers, they die. Sometimes animals die. How can we comfort people who have lost a loved one? This is what this lesson is about. And I'll ask Angel, would you like to read it?
Okay, sir.
All right.
How can I comfort a friend when someone has died? You would probably feel a little uneasy talking to a friend who has lost someone through death. It would seem out of place to talk about everyday things, and yet it may feel awkward to talk about death. When you meet your friend, you need not to try to look or feel as sad as she does, but rather show your genuine care. Sometimes it is best not to say too much, but just to sit quietly with your friend. She will feel your love even though you don't say much. If your friend would like to talk, ask her what she admires most about the person who died, or ask her to tell you about the fun times that she remembers having together. Tell your friend how it makes you feel to see her so sad. You can tell her that God loves her very much and
Very much.
feels sad with her. Encourage her to tell God how she feels. If your friend doesn't feel like praying, you could ask if it would be okay to say a prayer for her. Pray that God will help her to feel His great love and thank Him for the hope we have of being together one day in heaven.
Yes, I think that's a very good suggestion and advice for us. When somebody has lost a loved one, they feel lonely, they feel grief, and it's kind of very difficult for us to go and be around people who are grieving. But being with them, being together near them is very important. That's how we encourage them. They probably would feel lonely, they would feel alone, especially if that person was part of the family. So being there, you don't have to say much. You don't have to play with them. Just sit near them, be near them. That's really important. So when you have that opportunity, when when one of your friends has lost someone, you can do that. That's going to be really helpful. Pray for them and be there for them. And the verse for today, who would like to read that? Amisha, your hand is up. Can you? Verse for today.
Yes, sir. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no ill, for you are with me. Your root and your staff, they comfort me. Psalms 23, verse 4.
What's happening there in your house?
It's fine.
Somebody's fighting? Sounds like a fight. Okay, great lesson, isn't it? Yeah, something that we can all use in our lives because it's not natural, but people die, right? We always hear of somebody, someone losing their loved ones. It can be your teacher or your friend or even your relative. And it's important for us to know what to do when somebody has lost a loved one. Just be there for them, pray for them, encourage them, love them, pray for them. Tahila, take a picture of everybody who is present and make sure that you take the attendance. I mean, you mark the attendance. Attendance is very important. That's how we know who gets to go to the fun day and who doesn't. I really hope that your parents would allow you to go, even if they're very overprotective. I hope you all get to go to the fun day. Right? Being faithful is important, but having fun days is also important. Right? What's more important, fun days or being faithful?
Being faithful.
Being faithful?
Being
Yeah.
faithful.
I would say fun days, but okay. You chose,
said both.
you have made your choice. I'm gonna stop the recording.